was just saying to someone before, I feel a bit like an astronaut with this on. I've never worn one of these before, it feels a bit strange. But welcome. My privilege to welcome you here this evening. We're hoping that this evening becomes something of a regular thing at Macquarie. And I understand that we've had evenings not dissimilar to this in the past, but we're really wanting to change the conversation and offer to our community a whole series of these type of evenings going forward, not to the point where it becomes cumbersome, but often enough so that it's an enjoyable, intellectually invigorating experience. But tonight's conversation that you've been invited to be part of is really an opportunity to start visioning not about the Macquarie of the past, a little bit about the Macquarie College of today, but really about the Macquarie College of the future. And it relates to where we are today because we need to be positioning ourselves today to take advantage of the opportunities that are currently before us. I could talk for the next hour, maybe 2 or 3 hours. I'm looking around, seeing some staff looking back at me and going, no, Rowan, don't do that. But I'm not going to talk. I'm going to hand to Mr Peter Hutton now. Peter is the CEO of the Future Schools Alliance, or the FSA, as I've been referring to it in various publications and pieces of communication to the college community. Peter has a depth of experience, both within the independent sector and also the public sector as a school principal, most recently at Templestowe College in Melbourne, which is a school which is renowned for its innovation, and Peter was largely the architect of that. The journey of Templestowe College has been widely reported in the media, and I'm sure Peter will share some of that this evening. But Peter stepped out of that role to head up the Future Schools Alliance, which is literally an alliance or a community of schools across sectors working in Australia to vision and action future-focused learning. So the format of this evening is Peter's going to be sharing a perspective and some learning and thinking that he has gleaned over his years in education, and also what the FSA is currently doing to support schools across Australia. We're then going to have a panel session where there'll be an opportunity to ask Peter, myself and some other people that are up on stage questions as it relates specifically to any of the information that Peter may have shared, changes in education in Australia, but most particularly, of course, how that will impact, or has the potential to impact us here at Macquarie College. So please join with me in welcoming Peter to the stage this evening. Thank you, Peter.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Peter Hutton. I'm standing here, but I do tend to move. Okay, so I may come out and move amongst you. As Rowan so eloquently introduced, Peter Hutton, educator and futurist. It's a very interesting combination, being an educator and futurist. The educator bit took me 8 years of study at university. The futurist one took me about 15 minutes to put it on my bio. And they have done some studies around how accurately futurists do predict the future, and you'll be interested to know that on average they over-predict in the short term, but they actually under-predict in the long term. So I just think it's worthwhile, in the interest of full disclosure, making you aware of that. So I'd like to direct your attention to this particular image on the screen. It appeared in a French magazine in the year 1900, and what they were doing was trying to anticipate, trying to look into the future about what schools might be like. Now, one of the things about futurism, it's actually not trying to predict the future. It's not like reading a crystal ball or looking at tea leaves. What we're in fact doing is looking for what are the subtle signs of change that we see on the horizon, okay, and using those to inform where we think the future might go. Now, the other thing that's really important to know is that there is not one single future. And I'm not talking about some sort of metaphysics, bending, time warp, and so on. But what we're saying is there's not one future, just like there's not one present. And you might say, how can we not have one present? Well, I can assure you that being a white, middle-aged, middle-class male living in Gisborne, Victoria, where I live, is substantially different to being a transgender Indigenous person living in Cape York. So those two experiences are just so dissimilar, we might be in different worlds. And so just like we have different presents based on our own particular circumstances, there's not one future that we're moving towards. So if we just look at this for a moment, what sort of things do you think this particular artist got right, and what things did they get wrong when they were thinking about the future? It's not school, you don't have to put your hand up, and I can wait you out. Yes, and we thought that we were actually going to lose books as references in non-fiction. What else? Absolutely. It's a very sedentary process, and if you actually get students to draw a picture of school, they will almost inevitably draw a picture of a person sitting at a desk with a book, possibly a computer. So it was a very sedentary process. How are they going with the concept of wireless? Is that informed? Back then, of course, electricity had been around for a while, but it hadn't fully been distributed through households, etc. This was me, not in the year 1900, although not far from it, but I'm a person with dyslexia, and I would basically do anything that was possible not to do the learning bit, because I couldn't access it. So I was a master cleaner of dusters. How do you think the gender agenda is going here? Not so good, yes, they are all male. Anything else? What about the power dynamic?
Too much technology?
Certainly. Well, interestingly, they were actually using this mechanical technology. That was the thing of the day. And it's not actually such a bad predictor of the future. In terms of the way we operate in the world, we have these things called mental models. And it's not a bad thing that we have them, because if we didn't have a mental model, it would actually be very difficult to navigate our way through the world. If every time we were presented with some new circumstance, it was, wow, how are we going to deal with this? It would be quite strange. Now, you have followed a mental model tonight. Who's been to the college here before? At least once. Yeah? Almost all of you. Okay? So you knew when you had the invitation that essentially you would drive up, you would come in, there was probably going to be some food, you would sit down, you would listen, preferably not heckle, preferably, and you would make some evaluation. I think this guy's nuts, or that was interesting. But what if I actually handed you the control and said, look, the slides are fairly self-explanatory, knock yourself out. Now, I did this in Japan. Gee, it's fun playing with the Japanese. But the person actually did it. They stood up and gave their best impression of delivering this keynote, because I had totally shattered his mental model. Because when you come to something like this, you don't expect that to happen, do you? All right? Who felt really anxious and nervous about coming here tonight? Not so much? Do you think my level of anxiety was higher or lower than yours? Because it was me doing the presenting. And so we have these mental models for helping us navigate the world. The most common mental model that we have for school is that of a factory. All right? It was actually designed to teach young people how to come off the land, where they did have to actually think for themselves, and work in a factory. Because they weren't required to think, they were just required to do a job and follow instruction. And so that was how our current education system, which is not actually all that old, it's only been around for about 200 years, how it came into being. They needed to teach conformity, following rules, and a set of skills that were largely based around literacy and numeracy. Interestingly, the rich kids did not go to this sort of school. If you looked at a lot of the really old private schools at the time, they were often in just a small house where they might have had 15, 20, 30 students, but they were nowhere near like the Goliath that they now represent. There's also a mental model of what it is to be a successful student. And I wonder if, as adults, where we grew up thinking that this is what a successful student was, and that is go to school, get good results, get a good ATAR that allows you to go to university so that you can then get a good job, get a mortgage, have 2.1 kids. And so that was a model that many people have accepted as that's a good outcome. Now, almost at every level, that mental model is breaking down. And technology is largely to do with that, but it's also social changes as well. So, and I'll go on and talk about how that model is in fact breaking down. This was a picture of a school around the sort of 1920s mark, and it was actually a really good predictor for and preparation for what it went to. Can you see the resemblance? All right, it was actually a really good predictor. The scary thing is, this is in I won't name and shame, but this was in an elite private school late last week. Now, they've got a fair amount of technology in there. That board on the left cost about $15,000. All right, but is that going to inspire you? Can that transform your life? Or does that sap your soul? At any one time in Australia, we have 40% of students actively disengaged. That means just not doing what they're supposed to be doing, not engaging with the material at all. The scary thing is there's about another 40% who are passively disengaged. They're actually doing the work, they're handing it in, you won't see them, they won't bump out on the bell curve, but these students are not engaged in what they're actually doing in class. It now takes 4.7 years on average from when you finish your education to get full-time work in your chosen field. 4.7 years. When I graduated, it was 1 year. So it actually also takes 2.6 years to get any full-time work once you finish your education, be it at the end of year 12 after a diploma or after a degree. Now we all know, and we're possibly a slightly rarefied set, because generally people within this demographic come from a higher socioeconomic background, and so it's probably not 4.7, but 4.7 on average. So we know that some kids walk into a job, so what does that do to the average time that it takes you to get work? 60% of young people are currently studying for a career that's going to be significantly impacted by machine intelligence. I do like to talk about machine intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, because when we talk about artificial intelligence, we often think that the machine, the robot, is going to think like a human. Now that's not going to happen, because humans don't think logically. All right, it would be a really poor robot that thought like a human. There's a whole range of things that have been consistently, and it's replicatable research, where humans don't think logically and don't even perceive the world accurately. So a machine intelligence is going to be a different way of thinking than the way that we think. This was back in 2015 that this research was done, but they're basically predicting 5 separate careers and more than 17 different employers in a young person's life. Currently, 30% of all Australians, their employment is made up by a mixture of income. So not just having one full-time employer, they might have a number of part-time jobs, a small contract, a small business, etc. I'm certainly one of these 30%. The prediction is that it's only going to be 2027 at the current rate of change before 50% of the whole workforce has blended income. Now, our education system doesn't really prepare young people for the sort of skills that's required to manage blended income. We talked a little bit earlier before about the mental model of success. We talked about mortgages. And I know that when the information first came out saying that, that for many young people, having a home of their own wasn't going to be a reality. And we're going, oh, no mortgage. All right? I've done a number of focus groups with young people and they go, no mortgage. All right? I've seen what a mortgage did to my mum and dad. All right? I do not want one. And if you think about it, why would you want one? All right, it was fine when back in the day when it wasn't a huge percentage of your disposable income, but now young people are going, what if the work moves? What if I get an overseas opportunity? I don't want to be managing this property that I can't afford. So they're already flipping that into a way, they're going, I can buy more avocados. Sorry, political reference. Now, I want you to get a small tattoo. Okay, I know it's an ask, but I want you to get this tattooed at least in your brains. And that is, what percentage of all, these are local students, not international students who have essentially, bought a place in a course. Local students, what percentage of them use their ATAR for entry? 26%. That's the statistic I want you to burn irrevocably into your minds. We have designed, and don't forget, is that not a shock? That only 26% of all people that are getting into undergraduate degrees are using their ATAR. Now, given that only half the young people go to uni, we've essentially designed the whole top half of the secondary education system to sort out 13% of the kids. Do you not think that is having a disproportionate effect on kids' mental health and focusing the teacher's attention on something that really is only applying to, just a bit over 1 in 10 students? Three kids in the class. Now, I now want to take you a little bit of a journey into the future. So this was a cartoon. Anyone recognise it? Very good. Year? 63. We're all showing our age. In fact, you weren't there in 63, nor was I. But a lot of these predictions are now coming true that were once just a thing of fiction on the screen. This is a school in China who is experimenting with having 3 cameras at the front of the class, and it takes an image, it scans the faces of the students each 30 seconds, and it delivers one of 7 emotions. So it scans the face, it can detect cheating, it can detect if they're starting to snooze, inattention, not happy, angry, and gives the teacher live feedback. There's some of the emotions. There you go. Highly sophisticated. Now who finds that terrifying? Yeah? Can you imagine the pressure that you would feel as a student knowing that you were being continually monitored? Although this is where the futurist kicks in. Because just like, I reckon, I haven't been in the classroom for a little while because I've had leadership positions in schools. But I used to think that I was pretty good at knowing my students. But what if this AI was able to detect that one student in my class used to have positive affect, they were happy about 80% of the time. Then, over a month or so, it dropped down to 70, down to 60, down to 50. Would my humanness have perceived that drop? That perhaps this machine could? And then perhaps send a little note to the year level coordinator or whoever the wellbeing person is and just ask? So there can be some real positives that come from this technology as well. There's a startup in the US called Gaggle, and there was an assistant principal that was at a party, a social party, and he got a call from Gaggle, which they'd implemented in their school, saying one of their young people was about to take their life. And so he was able to ring the police, send the police around, and they intervened just before this young person took, extreme self-harm. Now, what had happened was the school had employed Gaggle, this safety management system, to monitor every communication that went through one of their devices, whether they were at school and or at home. And it had, machine intelligence had scanned. This is a school of over 2,500, every ounce of correspondence that was written and typed in, and picked up in real time that this student was saying goodbye. And then the machine intelligence contacted a human who read it, verified it, and then called the human assistant principal who was able to intervene. Now, I think that's a potential positive. But I can also see that it could be an incredible invasion of privacy if it was used incorrectly. What do you think the biggest motivator of the US introducing this technology is? Yeah, absolutely, school shootings. Okay, which are just, we don't hear the half, of course. I was in Japan recently and I met one of these peppers. All right, Japan are about to have the Olympics, as we know, but they're only about 32nd, I think it is, in the world for English-speaking language. And so the government have employed or purchased 500 robots to work in schools so that the students can help practice their English. This is a machine, a robot called Vigo, where if a student can't come to school, it can be through extreme anxiety or medical conditions, etc. But the student can be in their hospital bed and they can even pedal around or drive around and spend recess with their buddies and so on and interact. I am a big fan of Elon Musk. His prediction of when we have the first machine intelligence that is smarter, and I know that's difficult to define, but is more intelligent, can learn faster and know more than any human, is 5 years. So that's his prediction, before we have a machine intelligence that is smarter, essentially, than any of us. And we're not talking about rote knowledge. Currently, they've already got a robot that is reading through every piece of published, peer-reviewed published research and putting together that information in new ways. In medicine at the moment, in order to keep up to date with every piece of peer-reviewed data that comes out, you would need to be reading 169 hours per day. And that's why IBM and Google Health are working on robots or machine intelligence to assist doctors in making diagnoses. Interestingly, how long, if it's just say, look, Elon gets it wrong, all right? It might not be 5 years, it might not be 10 years, but I guarantee you it's not 20. Okay, so this is in, our near future. How long do you think it is from the time where we have a machine intelligence that's smarter than any human to when it's smarter than the sum of all human collective intelligence? How much longer? 15 minutes. That's the scary thing. Because it is so interconnected through the cloud, essentially once it's smarter than any of us, it'll be a cascade. And it'll be smarter than any of us. It'll be like a renaissance like we have never seen. It's good because, according to my good friend Charles Ledbetter, school is essentially preparing us to be good second-class robots anyway. We now have a huge amount of the information that's actually published on the net is actually computer generated. It's actually written by computers, and it's hard to decipher what's human and what's not. There's a program called PhotoMaths. It's an app that you can get on your phone. Young people, get this program. You can take a photo of virtually any mathematical equation, now including worded problems. Okay, and the computer will solve it for you, including workings. There is a concept called the digital twin. The digital twin, essentially privacy is going to end, as we know it. It's a quaint concept. It's okay, what we've actually found is that we're all slightly warped. Okay? But the concept of the digital twin is that you will be forever monitored and every preference that you have collected centrally. Now we could say that that's a bad thing, but we could also say that it could be a good thing. So what this does is your digital twin, it doesn't have to be a hologram. It's just a collection of, dots and dashes up in the cloud. But it essentially knows everything about you. How you like your coffee, which way you like to go to work, how warm you like the house at night, who you like to be friends with. It's even smart enough to discern some of those friends. The people that you can put up with on a good day, but you can't stand on a bad day? Your digital twin will talk to its digital twin without any of you being aware of it and steer you around one another. It's so smart, all right, that it will even deliberately annoy you so that your humanness doesn't normalise how good it's made the world for you. So it will deliberately frustrate you. And I know this is happening now, because if you've ever tried to have a Skype call, All right, the machine intelligence knows what I want to it, and it deliberately mucks me up. What does that mean when we actually have a machine intelligence that can do that? Not only that, but it can actually read facial expressions to the point now where there's a machine intelligence that can look at two partners talking and out-predict the best counsellor as to whether that marriage is going to be a success, or that partnership relationship is going to be a success or not. Because it's measuring hundredth of a second facial twitches that the human eye can't really see all that well. All right, and it can out-predict whether that relationship, if it detects contempt or disgust, you're going. At this point, we experience something that is a self-protective thing in our brain called cognitive dissonance, and that is where your brain shuts down and goes, that's quaint, but it doesn't actually let this stuff sink into your head. Is anyone feeling a little bit swirly or cognitive dissonance at the moment? No? Liars. No. But essentially, you've got one of two reactions, all right, to the changing world that is on our doorstep. Okay, and one is to become informed and grow a spine and make the adjustments necessary to cope with this new world. The other is to stick your head in the sand and go, it won't happen. It might not play out exactly like this, but it is going to change substantially. There's an organisation, the Global Education Leadership Program, and they were looking at how do we cope, what's a metaphor for how we should design education from this point forward. And they use the analogy of an astronaut. They don't train astronauts in 2 weeks. They train them over years. They don't know who they're going to fly with. They don't know when their mission is going to be scheduled. In many cases, they can't even complete the mission until some technology has been advanced, some invention that enables them to actually conduct that mission. But it doesn't stop them from analysing the future and training those astronauts ready for space travel. I think that's the really interesting position that Macquarie finds themselves in as a leader in this space, not to blunder, not to have your young people just, find themselves in that future unprepared, but they're actually looking, we're not crystal ball gazing here, we're actually looking at emerging technologies that are here now. And then saying, how can we prepare our young people for this future? Not throwing away the academic excellence and the focus on learning, absolutely not, but making sure that their skill set is broad enough to cope with this new future. I guess one of the key messages that we have when we look to the future, and largely this is why there is, I'm assuming that we're aware that there's been a huge increase in anxiety, both in young people, and also in the adult population. It's massive. And the reason for that is that it used to be possible for one human, if they were relatively educated, to sort of have a pretty good handle on how the world worked. It's now no longer possible. The world has got to a level of complexity that you can't solve it. All right? You cannot solve it. You cannot understand it. And what we need to do is learn to be able to sit with the uncomfortableness, right? Sit with the uncertainty, not trying to resolve it, but just going, it's okay. Right? Just coming to that point, don't try and solve it. Educators are the worst. We solve other people's problems, all right? Even when they haven't asked us to. We're just busybodies. No, but you understand, we can't solve everyone's problems. We can't even solve our own. And so we need to learn to be comfortable with that uncertainty. Obviously, picture of the snowflake. Why? The uniqueness of the snowflake. I don't know if there's ever been two the same. I'm suspicious, but I guess the point that we make is every young person is a snowflake. All right. Every young person is. They have their own uniqueness, their own unique beauty. That's one of the reasons why, as part of the FSA, we love working in faith-based organisations, because it marries so beautifully with that faith dimension of everybody having a unique beauty and needing to find their passion, their journey, their contribution. Now I'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking about building new ecosystems. So we've now said that the current system, sitting in rows looking at the front, is no longer fit for purpose. It's not enough. So what is the alternative? And that's why Macquarie have engaged with FSA, and the FSA is not me, it's a collection of other schools, all of whom are in the same circumstances, exploring the future, trying to work out what are the skills that we're going to need and how best to do it. It's not a consultancy, they haven't bought an answer, because that doesn't work. And being a student at Macquarie is quite different to being a student at Wodja Wodja in Rockhampton. Okay? We need to have a tailor-made solution for Macquarie, and even within Macquarie, it can't be the same thing for every student. So they're unique. The school is a unique context, but so is every individual, and we've got to stop thinking of young people as batched. Okay, I was walking through another school yesterday, and it was sort of like, now year 8s, do this. All right, we can't think of people as, just because they happen to have been born, 14 years ago. It just doesn't work. At Templestowe, one of our key changes is that we had this concept that yes is the default. And this is really important. This was one of the reasons why we were listed as Finland as one of the most 100 innovative schools in the world. If a student or a parent or a staff member had a suggestion or a request, so if they wanted to change it so it suited them, as long as it didn't take too much money, too much time, or hurt somebody else, negatively impact on somebody else, the answer had to be yes. Doesn't that sound like an organisation that you'd like to be proud of? There's a program there, it's not chaos, but if you want to tweak it, you want to make it fit for you, as long as it doesn't take the school a huge amount of their time resources or their money resources, and it doesn't impact on somebody else, the answer has to be yes. It's not, we'll think about it. Even if we don't like it, we had to say yes. It also stopped, to be honest, and it was staff who mean really well, but came up with the most crazy expensive suggestions. It actually forced them to go through that process and go, no, that's not going to work. And they would often then rejig their requests to something that was far more financially manageable. There were many no's at TC. We had no bells, a no yelling rule. That was for the staff, quite genuinely. It's amazing that adults feel that they can yell at young people with impunity, and yet they're not going to cop it if it comes the other way. And we had this, it was the students' definition as to whether they'd been yelled at or not. If they said they'd been yelled at, they had. No compulsory uniform. For those that, I'm not suggesting that any of the FSA schools need to adopt these, I'm just telling you a little bit about our school. We actually had to drop the uniform because we had too many local parents wanting to enrol their kids at our school without actually doing any investigation. It's a good school, I'll enrol. And then they came and saw the craziness, and then they're going, what is this? Whereas just by taking away the compulsory uniform, people go, that's a bit weird, I'll send my kid somewhere else. But what we did was take in those young people whose parents had really thought about the education and wanted what we had on offer. We had no detentions. 1,200 students in the school. We grew from 286 in 8 years to 1,200 students. No detentions. No detentions. We talked to the young people and said, why is it like that? And they said, well, why are you going to muck up? You can pretty much do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone else. So, why would you make other people's life hard? No compulsory subjects. Most students' programs still did look relatively normal. They did 6 things, but some of it, they might have been awesome at maths, so they could be 2-3 years ahead at maths, but they might have been right at level at English. And then they're an awesome musician, so that they could work at a higher level for that. Who is going to pick something that is too hard for you, and who is going to pick something that's too easy for you? It just makes, as some people have said, uncommonly common sense. What is the role of the teacher in all this? It's not like, we just hand control of learning over to young people. It used to be that a good teacher was the sage on the stage. They were all singing, all dancing, tapping, explosions in chemistry, volcanoes. I don't know why there's one experiment that has a volcano in chemistry, and it's always done on an open night, as they do this all the time. And then we went from there to the guide on the side, this sort of a nerd figure that was just sort of like on the periphery and just sort of intervening at subtle moments. And then we went to this new concept of the meddler in the middle, where they were the sort of the game player, manipulating the relationships and the learning and so on. The two more modern ways to think about educating is that of being a co-learner with students. It's now not uncommon to be teaching and having a student go, well, that's not actually true. That used to be the common belief, but you need to read this peer-reviewed research which has actually come up with this. No human can know more. I don't even think that any teacher can know more than all 25 kids in their class when they've got access to a technology machine. All right, they can fact check you as you go. The ultimate, and this is Professor Yong Zhao's form, is to be a co-owner of learning with young people. And that extends beyond the classroom to where young people, supported, actually help run the school with the staff. So at these particular schools, students are on things like curriculum committee, they're on the occupational health and safety committee, they're on the grounds committee. They're even on staff selection panels. We've been doing that for probably 7 years now. I can assure you that young people make the best judgments about who's going to be a great teacher. We still have a staff panel as well as a student panel. Okay? We assess their technical knowledge and competence, but the young person addresses whether they're going to be a good cultural fit, whether other students are going to want to engage with them. It's a great model. Student Employability Skills Development Program. Translation, we employ students to help run the school. So out of 1,200 students, we employ 10% of the young people to actually help do the job. All right, whilst they're at school. These are some of the jobs that we employed them as. So we would actually pay students who are really good at maths to take a block out of their timetable and go into a junior maths class and help. So rather than there being one subject expert, there might have been 5 in there, and it was really, really cost effective. Why would we pay our maintenance guy, who's a qualified builder, $56 an hour to empty a bin when I can get a 12-year-old to do it for $12? All right, so it made financial sense. It taught them real-life work skills. We had a rule that we wouldn't employ an adult to do a job that we thought a student might be able to do on a good day. What happens when students are actually able to study what they want? What happens? Their behaviour improves, the whole relationships with staff improve, their attendance goes through the roof. Our parents' satisfaction was 98%. Either positive or very positive. We had stories about young kids who the parents were literally trying to drag them out from under the bed because they wouldn't come to school. And the very same student came up and had a go at me, and he's going, Peter, I've really got to talk to you about this whole holiday situation. I've got skateboard orders to fulfill, and I need access to the laser cutter and the printing machine. How am I going to do that if you're closing the school for 2 weeks every term? So this is a young person who had gone from not wanting to come to school to where he's having a go at actually, because he wants to come and use our equipment. Every student had their own individualised learning plan. Every student. Who wrote those plans? They did. Right? The students wrote their own plan based on their strengths, their interests, supported by their parents who knew them really well, obviously, and also by a staff member who said, yes, I can see that plan. They can't just choose, crazy things that are just fun because they're planning out 5 years into the future. Students run a huge number of businesses at the school. I did have one young man, and to be honest, I love all my kids, I didn't like them all. Okay, and there's a subtle differences in their parents. We can love our kids but don't always like what they do. And there was one young man, and I thought, I have no idea how you are ever going to earn, your way through life. And he came to school. He was a sort of a nice kid, but he just There were certain issues. And he came to school one day and he goes, Peter, I found a business. I've gone, that is awesome. And I'm slightly surprised. I've gone, that is awesome. What is your business? He goes, I kill people for money. Okay, let's just take a couple of steps back. Just tell me about that. And he goes, well, there's a whole lot of old people like you, who play computer games, and they are sick of being killed by all their friends. So I log on as them and I kill them all. And I've gone, mate, is that a thing? Like, is that a real business? He goes, $375 for half a day thing. Yeah. And he had 7 clients. Why is it that we still base our education system on the harvest? All right, how many of you kids really need to come home and haul hay? All right, it's slightly bizarre. What if you've got parents that both work? All right, it's not so great. So many of the schools are looking at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We were actually investigating whether we could open the school 360 days a year, prompted by that boy actually. Not saying that every young person had to come there for 360 days, but they could come there. Because what we do know is that these schools of the future don't have to do the same thing to everyone. If the current education, if you're sitting there and going, but this very old-fashioned system is working quite well for my young person, awesome, keep going. All right, it's not like you're going to be forced to change that. But what if that young person is just really good at something and wants to extend, right? Or they found their passion and they want to do 2 times as much of it, 3 times as much of it. Why can't they? It's called hyper-specialization. I had one parent that goes, she came to me and she goes, Peter, I'm really worried about Lucas. His English is not good. And I've gone, that's because he's dyslexic. All right, I share something with him. And she goes, but, his spelling's not great. I've gone, he's got spell check. Okay, he can cope. And she goes, but I think he should spend more time on his English. And I said, are you hoping that he is going to become a poet? Because I can pretty much guarantee that's not his interest area. But what I can tell you is he is an awesome drone builder and flyer. And she goes, is that a thing? And I've gone, it's a thing. All right? And so I said, how about, he still needs to know how to use the technology so that he can use spell checker or he can use text-to-speech or speech-to-text to access material. But how about instead we take him out of PE's class as well, all right, very uncoordinated, all right, and how about we give him 3 lots of something called geek studies, where he can build drones to his heart's content. All right, and he built the most amazing series of drones. He built one that has a claw that can fly over a building and pick a basketball off the roof and then bring it back to land. He built another one that had a helium balloon on it that would lift a bird, a hawk, a plastic one, and drag it round a winery and land back on a charging pad. All right? What do you think his English score was? Who cares? Is the point. All right? He was actually picked up by the army as a drone pilot. It's 1 of 3. They talk about now that you need to have these things called a T profile, and that is a general set of skills across the top, and then one area of strength. Now that, I remember when that came out, it lasted about 20 minutes before somebody said we need an H profile. And what that is, because there's plenty of people that have got that same depth of area of interest, but what we need is 2 areas of interest, right? And the more diverse, the better. Ballet and engineering, or horticulture, as the case might be. All right? 2 bizarre things, and you're one of very few people who knows how to make the linkages. That's when you become employable. And when we say employable, it could be self-employed as well. The reality is, most people's life is that. Okay? Start something, explore that, cross across to this, get deep, find you made a mistake, go back, and then you have your ups and downs in life. Isn't that more what life is? Rather than this supposed linear progression that we plan school. 13 years, Everyone needs 13 years. Nobody's smart enough to do it in 12. Nobody needs 14. Is that logical? You get time out of prison for good behaviour. So where to start? And this is the challenge that's confronting the school at the moment. And I guess those arrows, some of them are at least, are pointing towards being part of a group of schools that are looking at what the future might look like. And that's a really smart way of doing it. It's not engaging experts that have, studied in other parts of the globe and then come in with this purpose-built solution that as soon as it goes wrong, the staff step away from. This is about professionals working with other professionals who have had their eyes open to how the future is going to change and said, how can we work together to make an education that will work for every young person? I'm not sure if you're aware, but Australia is the richest country in the world, no joke, as measured by median income. So the middle person in the country is wealthier than any other country. Why then can't we be the ones that lead the way in education so that we have no young person fall through the cracks? That everyone comes out feeling like a success. I'm going to move on from that. We did talk a little bit about the analogy being preparing an astronaut. Now, and I think this is really important for those that come from a faith background. See this astronaut here. There's still a human in there. With all the machine intelligence and all of that sort of thing, the machine is not human, and our humanness is unique. The fact that he or she is wearing all this protective equipment doesn't change the nature of the human within. But what it does, this suit is a set of skills that this person is going to need to cope with an increasingly hostile environment so that they can cope and thrive in that and communicate still with other people. You'll notice that for some strange reason in this picture, this person is now no longer tethered to the mothership. This is a very dangerous thing, okay? And it's a dangerous thing when our young people are not tethered to their community. And so that's one of the things that we need to do. Questions?
Who's implementing this?
Essentially, the school, in concert with, in partnership with, the parents and the students. So one of the important things about the FSA is we make no demands on the schools. So they give up none of their decision-making power. It's all with the individual. Did that answer your question, or are you saying which schools are implementing this? How long is it going to take? At that point, can we take that on notice? Because that's actually not my call. Yeah, and that's something for Rowan as the leader of the school to address. Yeah. I'm not sure if oh no, that's another thing. Basically, you don't start by flipping the whole system. That's just silly. Okay? So what you do is you look, actually I have a slide which people could read in the background, but essentially you look at what you're currently doing, test it against some of these assumptions, who's doing what to whom, how can we change those assumptions, and then how can we test it in small ways, okay? And generally we work with those people for whom it's working least best currently, because they're the ones that want to change the most. So if the current system is not working for these people, they're the ones that you start the trial with, okay? And you test in a small way, you get feedback, and then you change again. Okay, but the whole model that I guess the Future Schools Alliance subscribes to is empowering young people to take control of their own education, supported by the professionals and supported by their families.
The individual learning plans, you obviously have 1,200 separate plans for your school.
Yeah.
Is there some form of clustering in those, or how do you manage 1,200?
Yeah, definitely. The reality is when we ask young people what they want to study, there are definite like clusters, and that they do fall out into classes. So it's not like 1,200 kids walk in and go, I feel like poetry today. I shall sit under a tree. Like, we had, one of our big programs was working with animals, and we had around 250 students who did working with animals as a program. Now they were managing, you go, well, why are they working with an animal? Like, how is that going to help? What we did is found over time that the people that did working with animals, and it tended to be our younger students, went on to move into the caring profession, so primary school, like primary teachers, early childhood, nursing, doctors, all of this sort of caring, psychologists, the caring professions. They were also, as a group, think about this, a group of 250 kids, so they're divided into chunks of sort of 25 kids. They had keys, not all of them, but the leaders of that program, there was a whole structure, they had keys to the school, alarm keys, and they fed those animals 365 days a year. And it was on them to organise that. Their food budget was $46,000. And that was a thing that was totally run by students. Yeah?
I've got a question. I'm not sure how it was with the ATAR, because how do you change the mentality, not just of the school, the parents, but if, for example, if you've got a child that is not that great in maths, believe it or not, that child got a lot of pressure from their own kids, because they go, you want my teacher ATAR because you're not doing good, so you're putting the whole class down. I don't know how that goes.
Yeah. One student should not have any influence. ATAR is designed so that, it's not done on a group average, or, like there is a perception out there that if...
That's the perception.
Yeah.
That's how to change that. So it's not pressure, because you get pressure on the student, the parents, and the teachers. The teachers feel really sorry, for the kid too.
Yeah.
So they get really hard time trying to work on this kid to keep up the kids and the whole.
And the reality is that there's some high quality research out there to say that academic grades, including, this is Australian research, NAPLAN and ATAR, is somewhere between 53% and 74% hereditary. So in other words, I hate to say it, but a lot of the equation is the way that our genetics are wired and how those genes have been expressed. So it's not just it's a lie, and that's why I quote that. And I'm happy to provide the research to anyone about that. But it's unfair to say that kids succeed just through hard work, because there's a hell of a lot of kids out there that work really, really hard but don't get that result. And it's not just because they haven't got a bad work ethic. And what we've got to do is find out what their unique talents are. Because, to be honest, we don't need just a whole lot of kids that have got narrow academic skills.
How do you define success and how do you measure it?
There are whole faculties within education, university faculties within education faculties within universities that are devoting their time to measuring success. With my own school, when I resigned, they said, what would you like as a gift? And I said, I would like the data. Okay, I want the data on every young person who spent more than 12 months in the school. I want to know what their outcome is. So we employed a whole lot of kids to stalk them on Facebook and Instagram and say, what are you doing, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Now, out of 1,300 kids that had been through the process and left by the time I finished, we got down to the point where I thought like, that on average, one quarter of kids don't complete first year and half the kids don't complete their degree. That's pretty much across the board. It is the big 8 universities have slightly better statistics than that, but on average that's what it is. And I thought, this is going to be easy. Our kids will be staying in university longer and they'll have better outcomes, etc., etc. But how do you measure a kid who started in engineering but found that actually that's not their passion at all? They want to be a diesel mechanic, right? Or, they don't want to design cars, they actually want to race them, for instance. Is there anything wrong with that? And so I had 2 kids that were working at KFC, right? 2 kids working at KFC. For, not on the management program or anything like that. For one of them, I thought, this is awesome. That is amazing. The student had like significant learning difficulties, and they were getting there. They were doing their job. The boss of the manager was really happy with them. Another kid, one of our highest performing, most capable kids, lateral thinker, he's there. I had to go and talk to him. I've just gone, what are you doing? You know, like, are you saving up, son? You know, are you saving up to go overseas? No, I like working here. Are you doing it to prepare yourself for university? You know, are you becoming a man of the people? No, I just like it here. Now, is that a success story? I don't know. All right, that's what I came out with. I don't know. And so the only measure that I could use in the end was knowing this young person, would I like that for them if they were my son or daughter? You know, that was the only measure that we used. Out of 1,300, we had 18 kids that I considered had a negative outcome, which I reckon is unbelievably good. To 6 of those students, some of them had some fairly serious mental health issues, and we were sort of in contact with them. But for 6 of them, we reached out and we actually offered them internships at the school. So paid them for 6 months. They did a certificate 2 in work studies or whatever, and then we tried to I don't know what became of that because I left, but transitioning them back into work. Might call a stop at that time. Yep.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is David Chapman. I'm the Assistant Principal Teaching and Learning. We're going to take a few minutes now and just bring a panel up here. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, and we're going to throw to you guys to ask some questions as well. And so to start off, we'll start at the other end. I guess just so everybody knows who everybody is, Rowan and everyone, if you just want to give us in a sentence or two who you are and why you're up here on the stage.
Rowan Nature, I happen to be the principal at Macquarie College.
And astronaut.
Marvin Anderson, DP, Senior School.
David Fox, I'm the Chair of the Council.
Junior School.
Peter Hutton, Future Schools Alliance.
Thank you. So again, just to get things moving here with the panel, can you tell us something, a personal moment or experience you've had with a student perhaps that has indicated that you think change should probably happen within education? So we'll start with the front.
For me personally, it was back in 2015. I had the opportunity to travel to the US. I was doing a short course at Harvard University with some colleagues. We took the opportunity to visit a number of schools. One of the schools we visited was Newton North High in Boston, a very large school, and a teacher there had decided that they wanted to run a STEM course in their school. Wasn't supported by the school administrators. The teacher was given a basement, no windows, and there was basically no budget. But I think the school administrators were hoping the problem was just going to go away. And it quickly morphed into the most popular course in the school. And what I saw there was one particular girl who was totally disengaged from her learning journey, around the year 9, 10 level. And through the course of engaging in project-based learning and a different approach to the way the school was being structured for her, she actually had the opportunity to design a surfboard. And the inner of the surfboard, rather than being a foam inner, she actually, through some machination with the gene structure, actually was able to grow a mould, a physical mould, into the space. But the trick that this young girl discovered in the course of this totally free-ranging program in the school there was the capacity to switch the mould from biodegradable to non-biodegradable. And she was snapped up while she was still in year 10 and put into a course at MIT, and then was also picked up by a major industry group. So she had achieved a tertiary qualification and a pathway into a very successful career where she was able to extend those skills. And she was a girl who had been, destined for the, if you like, the academic scrap heap in this very large very accommodating school community that she was part of.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, Mark.
Thanks, Dave. I can think of a couple of examples over the years. One goes back a fair way. We had a boy at school who was just constantly in trouble. School wasn't, it was, I guess, a square peg in a round hole situation for him. And if I reflect back on that time now, it's very evident that it wasn't actually meeting his creative needs. This guy now is global. He works out of the United States in producing for Disneyland and Disney World and all those sorts of places, and almost impossible to access without going through several layers of PAs and all those sorts of things. And so become a very successful person. But if I was to say his name to some of the teachers who taught him back in the day, it would have been, oh no, not, such and such. And I think and another boy that is closer to home, a guy called Aaron Russell, who's Newcastle's, I think, first V8 supercar driver, raced for Fitness Plus. His dad said to him, you can race cars, but you've got to complete the HSC, you've got to finish school, that very sort of traditional approach, I guess, to education. And I look back there and I think, well, what were we not doing to accommodate Aaron and his skill set and his needs? And so I think, there's a lot that we can ask ourselves in terms of what the school can offer to meet the needs of probably the vast majority of kids that don't fit into that little box of traditional learning styles, I guess, and traditional learning outcomes. So, yeah, I think this is a really exciting journey that the school is beginning. I had the privilege, I'll stop talking in a second, but a couple of years ago to listen to Jack Ma. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Ma and Wally Foundation, who are doing scholarships at the university now. But this guy, I think he's worth about $80 billion now, and he is the owner and founder of Alibaba, which is like China's eBay. And he made the point here in Newcastle a couple of years ago when he came that, much similar to what Peter said, that very soon machines are going to be smarter than people. So we actually need to start teaching our kids to be better at other things, which he called soft skills. So the skills of communicating and working together and teamwork and caring for others and some of those sorts of things. So I think it's exciting that we're stopping, having a look at our program and saying, are we actually ticking the boxes for what our future workforce looks like?
So I come to this from a different perspective. I actually work at the University of Newcastle, and I'm in the technology transfer group. So I'm a scientist with a doctorate in finance. So I don't know if I'm H or a T or what it was, but when I did it, people thought I was insane because they said, you just don't do that. But it allowed me to do things and get jobs that most people wouldn't get. I had good fun. I ended up running a hedge fund. Running that, I had to recruit people. And my old belief was, if I was technically wonderful at something, I'll have to employ me because there's no choice. But it was then when I thought, most of the technically proficient people, you can get a dozen of those. I wanted people who were able to engage. I wanted to turn up and work with someone and see them for 5 years. So we employed passionate people who were emotionally intelligent, their EQ. And I've discovered recently that people with high emotional intelligence, or the ability to engage people, earn 30% more. And so there are all these soft skills. And one of the beautiful things that I've seen, and in fact we're here because we care about children's education, is that the soft skills are encouraged here at the school. Macquarie encourages the emotional intelligence. There are technical things, but it's all these other factors that will contribute to someone who can engage with people meaningfully. And so the university is currently exploring how do we get people into the university courses where they should be. And to be honest, we don't have the answers. But what's encouraging is the people here at the school are passionate and they care and they're looking and they're starting to look. So hopefully I'll be able to help facilitate, and I know there are some very motivated people at the school, to blend the university and the school together and try and find those answers. To try and find answers where we facilitate emotionally engaged students who will pick up technicalities, but they can do that. It's the person that you develop that's fundamentally important.
Thank you, David.
Leads into what I was going to share. As a junior school teacher, we spend so much of our time outside of class hours dealing and supporting students who are having difficulties or challenges with friends, or just managing upset or managing when things don't go their way. And I guess it's always been a frustration of mine that this work that we need to do, it's so important, the work that needs to be done in supporting children and how to manage socially and emotionally and providing them with opportunities to develop those skills. It's kind of sits outside of the curriculum, and we have to do it before school and after school and during recess and lunch times. And then we get back to the real business when we go back into class and teach them how to add or how to eat healthfully and things like that. And I know at Macquarie College when I first started 5 years ago, we started to look at, well, this doesn't make sense. This is something that's super important, and we need to embed this within the curriculum, and we need to spend time developing these skills, and these are the things that really matter. And I know schools across everywhere are talking about this, but just the concept of here's the curriculum, but then this is the work that we really need to do, and these are the skills that the children really need. When I was working in the UK, I was teaching 6 and 7 year olds, and they had to sit NAPLAN equivalent tests at 6 and 7, and it was such a rigorous process, and the standard was so high, and the pressure was so high on the teacher to reach or ensure that the students reached the standard that playtime was taken away, and history and geography and art were cut out of the curriculum. And I feel, I know in Australian schools the pressure is not quite as much, but there is still pressure there. Teaching Year 3 for the last few years, as much as we tried to, this is just another test, it's an assessment, it's a small picture or a snapshot into where you're going, and it's all about giving us, the teachers, information. The students would still sit through the 4 tests that they had to do and get to the end and go, oh, and you could see the anxiety and the pressure. As teachers, we look at that and think, really? That's not how it should be. Something needs to change.
2 very quick questions. Two stories. One is my barista. He was a very successful student. He went through, he did a Bachelor of Biomedical Sciences, got very high grades, missed out on getting into medicine, which was what he really wanted to do. Hasn't been able to be employed in 2 years, and he's now been employed as a storeman. So that's what happened, and he's got a $60,000 head step. So that's, and he's very, makes a great coffee, but he's a great communicator as well. The other thing is I do another presentation for employers about working with young people, and so in order to do that I run a lot of focus groups, and I had a group of very high-performing young people, all of whom were through their first undergraduate degree and onto their second, and there was a young person that was doing his PhD, so he's doing the highest level of academic attainment, and I said, what do you want employers to know about you? What is it that you want them to know about working with young people? And his comment was, and it just floored me, just because we have a degree in something, don't expect us to know anything about it. And I've gone, sorry? And he's going, well, I've got a bachelor's degree in science, majoring in chemistry. He says, I know there are atoms and things, and I can tell you the first 20 elements in order, but it's pretty much just dropped off. Now I'm a biology specialist. And I just couldn't believe it. He goes, but what I'm really good at doing is picking up bucket loads of information, answering tests, and then forgetting it all as I walk out the door.
Okay. I've got a quick question for Peter. Usually when 60 Minutes comes to the door, it's not always a good thing. Why do you think they wanted to come talk to you about Temple stuff?
At that stage, and that was a few years ago now, but basically there weren't any the schools that I was aware of in Australia that were really challenging the basic assumptions of education. There was a lot of replication, so everybody was trying to outdo each other, seemingly all catering for the same top group of students. It was seeming like if you didn't fit into that, you just didn't count. And I think we were the first school that basically looked at students as an individual.
Yeah, I've got a question for David as well. Just briefly, do you think high schools are doing a good job of preparing students for university, to be successful at university, or is there a lot of potential there to improve?
David, I absolutely agree there's a huge amount of potential. I think part of the trouble that complicates this picture is that universities aren't even sure what students should be doing and how they can participate and select them. I think it's a very complicated issue. I know that very quietly at the university, they're wondering if they're encouraging and teaching the students in the right areas. Are they facilitating the students who do get in and somehow do thrive? Are they facilitating graduates who are firstly ready in the right areas with the right skills? And how do you actually teach them? Because the MOOCs, as Peter and I were talking before, I think you were there as well, the MOOCs, the massive open online courses where you could have 500,000 people do a course, they're going to take over the world. And I haven't heard of them recently. Because of course that method of learning, it only had 5% success rate, 5% graduate from courses. So there's a very small number of people who are suited. So the answer in a very short sort of summary is, I think we're all learning together, but there's enormous potential.
Okay, we're going to come out here in just a moment. I've got one more question for the panel, so I have a question very quick. Back to Rowan, we're talking a lot about change. We're talking about the need for change, and things are definitely going to have to, we're going to be preparing students. But what are some of the things that you think over the next 10 years will stay the same or should stay the same? So if we come back to Macquarie College in 10 years, what would we hope to still see?
I think for Macquarie College, and hopefully the same comment would be said about any faith-based school, there's not a separation between being a faith-based school and having excellent results for students. What we need to start thinking about is what is captured within those excellent results. What does it mean to have an excellent result as a student? Is it an ATAR in the high 90s? And wouldn't suggest for a moment that drops off the radar for being a priority. But should that be a priority for every student? Or should we be looking more broadly and seeking to express our learning program as something far more diverse than that? But around that, things that we would be holding on to, I would say with total certainty that we want to hold on to and continue to build and create a thriving context for the Macquarie College culture of community, of support, of having that sense of being together and working towards something that's very, very purposeful. I would like us to continue to be a place where every student has an opportunity to be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And I know that might sound a little bit cliche, but that's not the reality for many students in schools across the country today. So having a program that's diverse enough and as deep and as differentiated as possible to ensure that the needs of all students are being met.
Thank you. So I've been here 7 years now. This is going to be the best place I've worked. Marvin, how long have you been here, and what would you like to see continue?
So I worked here as a very young teacher in the 90s for 3 years, and I've been back here in this role for 14. But I guess when I interview prospective parents and students coming into the school, it's the thing that they find difficult to put their finger on is what I think we need to try and keep, and that is our culture, what Rowan referred to. And many of them just say, we're not really sure what it is, but there's just this nice feeling when we come onto the campus, when your prefects take us on these tours and the students represent you in the community. And I think that's a day. I think getting too big, sometimes you can potentially compromise your culture. So I think I'd like to see us maintain our culture, the good rapport and good relationships between students and teachers. Those sorts of things would need to be preserved in my ideal view. And I think, picking up on what I said earlier, I think it's, what I would not like to see is a situation where kids are achieving in spite of us, not because of us. And I think the stories that Peter tells are students achieving because of what that school did. And I think some of our success stories in the past have come in spite of maybe what we did where the kids' school wasn't the right fit for them. So.
Tanya, you've come with a wealth of experience from other schools. What are some things you've seen here that you'd like to see continue as well?
Students love learning, and students are engaged and want to do their best. And there's a community around that value learning, and it's such an opportunity for a teacher to go into a class and have a class full of students who are eager eager and want to learn and want to know what is out there, curious, and just want to do their best. It's a huge privilege to be a teacher in front of or working with those students, and I definitely wouldn't want to lose that, but I think it also provides an awesome platform for us to move forward and take that to new levels.
Excellent, thank you. Now, I am a teacher as well, and we will finish on time, don't stress. Do we have any questions out there?
I've just got a question for Peter. I don't know much.
Thank you. I don't know a lot about your school, but just the time frame that it took your school to get from what you call a traditional school to up until you left.
So the change journey was 8 years while I was there. It was a totally different context to yours though. Like, it was a broken school when I started, so I was able to get a lot of change in early. But we also had nobody to guide us either. But you know, I think the sort of cultural change that we're talking about is at least a 5-year proposition. And again, I'm not suggesting that it will look anything like that. It has to match your context. But,
I think it's really important to understand that Peter has shared a change journey in the context of Macquarie College, which is totally different as ES, a totally different context. So the change process we're looking at here at Macquarie is a totally different journey. We're not abandoning the HSC. We're not abandoning academic excellence. We're saying, what other skills do we need to be building into our young people to prepare them for the uncertainty of the reality of workplaces going forward. David, Tonya, Marvin, myself and some other administrators here from the school recently attended a symposium in Sydney where we had the federal and shadow education ministers, the state education and shadow ministers. We had the heads of all of the various education sectors. You had the head of MESA, had a range of people there, ACARA, all the peak bodies represented. Probably the single, and it was a conversation in the context of the looming changes in education in New South Wales particularly, but also at a national level. And across that breadth of people, probably the single thing that was agreed upon by everybody is that the HSC credential, as we currently know it, is in its final days. Because everybody is understanding very, very broadly that we're preparing our young people for redundancy. And so we have to, as a whole education community, reconsider where we're going and how we're preparing our young people for the future. We've just been through a federal election. One of the key points of agreement probably, and you may know more about this, Peter, than myself, I'm sure you do. My understanding is that across the major parties there's general agreement to adopt the Gonski 2.0 reforms. One of those reforms is over the next 5 years in Australia to dissolve the traditional Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, Year 10 and create vertical learning experiences for students right across Australia. So this isn't a conversation that Macquarie is, we're not some wild experiment, not some wild expedition into the future on our own. What we're seeking to do here at Macquarie is to begin the process of having a conversation with our school community, certainly having a conversation with our students, doing all that we can to make this a collaborative process. For myself coming in as a new principal at the college, it's not a matter of me saying to the staff, these are the 5 things that we're doing for the next 15 years. It's about raising a level of awareness and allowing people to begin the process of iterating that journey for themselves. But your voice as parents, as part of the community, is critical to us. We've made some subtle changes to some of the administrative processes in the college to increase the amount, I'm not sure if you'd say the amount of voice, but certainly the breadth of voice. And an example of that is one of the peak committees that guides the learning program at Macquarie is our leading learning team. And just recently we've changed the structure of that team so that it's open not just for the committee members, but open for any staff member in the school. And in the discussion that we had in the last week or so ahead of this evening, we decided to make that an open group to every member of the school community. So if there are parents who want to attend every second Wednesday afternoon after school and sit with the school leaders and be involved in a conversation about where the college is going in terms of its learning, there's obviously an agenda which will be published, and also welcoming students to be part of that conversation as well, because school is actually for students. We're seeking to build a program that's relevant and effective for them. And I could go on and on about the various very, very deliberate processes that we're taking within the college to ensure that we're running a program that's actually meeting the needs of the students that are walking through the gates every day. Sorry for taking over.
Sorry, I'll keep an eye on the clock. Have we got any more questions up here? Yeah.
I've got to let the voice leave that. Okay.
Probably a question for Peter. I run a recruitment business, Peter, so I see a lot of people at various stages of their career often asking the question about a different challenge or trying something different or wanting to change for a range of reasons. And I think some of the stuff you've talked about for school-age children is awesome because it gives them an opportunity to try a lot of different things. And I'm sure if you surveyed any school-age child from year 1 through to year 12, what would you like to do when you leave school? Have to be over 80% of them would say, well, I don't know. And in my line of work, I can assure you that in most cases that doesn't change. The 35-year-olds, the 45-year-olds, 55-year-olds, what do you want to do next? I don't know. My question is, perhaps more from a futurist point of view, in addition to this trialling all these different experiences and subjects during school and which is awesome, have you also come across an assessment, a self-assessment tool, or something else that might help young people, give them greater insights into themselves about what they're likely to enjoy doing, where they're likely to find their passion? Because I think that would be helpful. I think trying a whole lot of different stuff is awesome, but wouldn't it be great if we could fast track that and do a self-assessment that says, you know what, Peter, you're probably likely to really enjoy this, and this. There's 100 tools out there, I certainly know some of them, but I'm wondering if you've come across anything that seems to be gathering a huge amount of momentum.
I think it's interesting when you use the word trial. You know, we trial things. It's potentially you could interpret that comment as if you don't go on and then make that your passion and your career for some period of time, then there hasn't been potentially value in it. Whereas I guess the new way of learning is that it's the things that you did for a short amount of time, or when you're on holidays, or all of these little things, they all add. Like they certainly add to your neural circuitry as well. But we learn about ourselves through those processes. So I don't see it as sorting through 10,000 options to find the right thing. And I know that in our school, one of the things that the kids were worried about was because they could see a lot of other kids, they'd found their thing. And some of them are going, but I don't know what my thing is. I haven't found my passion. And, that was causing them stress. And so we actually de-stress it and say, start with your interests. Just what are you interested in? And if they say nothing, I go, ballet class for you. and then they go, but I don't want to do ballet. Well, good, that's a start. That's one tick off the list. Let's go to the next one. But it's about travelling that path less travelled. And so literally trialling things that you don't even think that you're going to like. Just one other point that you raised there, because I do have a slide somewhere that's advice to parents. And one of the key things you can do to lower kids' stress is come up with a social narrative for your child. Okay? Because whenever you meet a young person, inevitably you don't ask them about the weather, you go, what year are you in? And what do you want to do when you finish school? Okay, and that causes kids, they tell me, huge amounts of anxiety because they don't know. And you're right, as 30, 35, 40, 50-year-olds, many people don't know. So you construct a narrative that will keep your grandparents apart. So you go, engineering. That's it, right, done. Come up with anything to get people off your back, because otherwise you go, I don't know, and you come off as a flake. So just pick something. School teacher. Done.
Thank you. All right, I have noticed the time. I just want to mention one thing. When you're reading the newsletters from Macquarie or emails, can you keep an eye out? We're working on a project this year. It's going to take some time, and we're going to look for your input about graduate profiles. We're getting our heads together, and we really want to invite you into that space to consider what kind of student we want as they're leaving the college. And that's going to be a varied thing. It's not just one picture, and so we're going to be seeking your input. So we have run out of time. I really want to thank David and Peter for being here, and all the staff that turned out, in particular the parents. We really appreciate you coming out. I'm sure that the panel members will stick around for a little while. We've got other teachers here that are happy to chat for a bit, but make sure that you feel free to leave. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
One final comment before everyone disappears. This is part A. There's a part B to this conversation in September, where we have Nick Salmon from Harvard University in the Collaborative Learning Network. Nick consults to governments right across the globe on future-focused learning. David and myself are part of a group of people who are going over to spend 2.5 weeks with Nick next month, High Tech High, PBL Works World Conference in San Francisco, to continue the work that we're doing. But Nick will be here running an evening and being available to answer questions and to build on the journey that we started here tonight with Peter. So we'll publish the date in September, but keep that in mind, something to look forward to as we continue this conversation. Thank you.